Additional aids and services are available to individuals with disabilities. To make such a request, please contact us by email, by clicking the Help tab in the PD portal, or at pdportal@tamu.edu, by phone, including Relay Texas at 1-800-441-7323, or in writing to Train PD, PD Portal Support, 4477 TAMU, College Station, Texas 77843. Both a transcript and accessible document of the content presented in this webinar can be found as resources in the course description. Click on the blue links under Course Resources in the description. When a link is clicked, a new browser window will open.
I want to welcome our presenter, Elizabeth Liz Moya, and with more than 23 years of adult education experience, Liz has worked to advance the quality of service offered to adult learners with particular attention to English language learners, program design, and training offerings. Her work is centered on using data to implement initiatives and create resources at the local and state level. Liz is a pro-literacy certified manager in program improvement, and she earned her master's in education in adult education and training from Colorado State University and her BA in psychology from University of Texas in El Paso. So for fun, Liz enjoys nature walks, roller coaster rides, and spontaneous gatherings with friends and loved ones. So welcome.
Appreciate that. I also like bread and ice cream, I gotta say. Can never go without mentioning that. But thank you for that warm welcome. And it's so great to be here with everybody today. We're gonna go ahead and start off with Ring Ring, Smartphones for Workforce Integration. We're gonna talk about the incorporation of digital literacy for adult education and literacy learners, and the awareness of features and apps to contextualize for workforce application. And then we'll touch upon everyday lesson applications to enhance learning transfer for employability skills development. This is not going to be a technology how-to, it's more of an overlay of what some possible considerations are for using smartphones in the classroom, specifically in the area of workforce integration. When was the first time you used a smartphone? Question number 2. Who helped you set up your phone? Question number 3. Did you ever use a call a friend lifeline to navigate on your phone? And if so, do you remember for what? Last question. What was the last function you learned to do using your smartphone? Let's talk about the impact of the digital divide. Ladies and gentlemen, the digital divide is when folks do not have the same access to technology or to devices or skill sets for various reasons. And my question to you is, what do you think the impact of digital divide is on your learners specifically? There's a PAC study in 2017 talking about how the digital divide increased during the pandemic. That's no surprise, right? We all went through that. We all suffered through that. We all rode that ride of how to either do a webinar or how to do sign-in sheets remotely or test remotely, and we had to learn along with our children, right? But what you may not know is that minorities and those who are marginalized, older people, those who are in the lower income bracket, tend to suffer on the digital literacy aspect where they don't have access to the skill sets. And those who are immigrants also have a higher percentage. So I don't know if that may or may not be a surprise to you, but it's always good to look at the data to find out what that impact is. What that research boils down to for that digital divide, 3 things. We need to have access to the internet, reliable internet, I must add, having access to a device, and not just any device, also a reliable device, one that the battery pack works, one that has sufficient memory to run the apps, one that can run updates, one that can be serviced or you can troubleshoot, and of course, proficient use of technology. So you just don't need to know how to turn on your device. You really need to know how to navigate that device so that you can troubleshoot. And unfortunately, we're all over the place. One might consider that a cell phone, especially smartphones, are abundant and commonplace. But for those of you well connected in the classroom, you might have experienced on more than one occasion that students monitor their cell phone data because they're counting their minutes. Yes, some people still count their minutes. They don't want to download an app because they don't have any more memory, or they're on a family plan. That limits their ability to use that technology that should be available to them. Maybe you are trying to access a student, reach out to a student, but that student no longer has that cell phone number because it's no longer in service. Well, the Pew Research Center conducted a study that found that 28% of adults have used a smartphone as part of their employment search. And half of those have filled out a job application using a smartphone. 28%, that's a lot of people that signifies they don't have another device. They don't have a laptop or a desktop. They have to do it on their phone. But mobile job seekers often encounter difficulties like accessing and reading content, as well as troubleshooting, submitting files and documents. So it's not just the technology, it's the compound effect of literacy with technology use. The digital divide is best described by the absence or having unreliable access to internet, access to a device, and or proficient use of technology. These issues are further compounded by other facets for an adult learner, such as job or career outlook, household earnings, their children's education, health and financial literacy, and civic engagement. The most important thing that I want you to walk away with from today is that our learners must be able to navigate in order to advocate, whether that's advocating for themselves or for their family or someone else. And so it is up to us. Da, 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 da. We are the super teachers, right? We are the AEL lifesavers. And if we don't teach them, if we don't try to bridge that gap, starting from the very, very bottom of how to turn it on and how to troubleshoot and how to access apps, then folks, if it's not us, then who? It's really up to us to build that self-efficacy along the way and strengthen those technology skills and restructure how we approach technology. So start looking at your pictures on your phone and identify one that fits under the action category, the celebration category, a furry friend, or a sporting event. So I want to demonstrate that this little activity that we are participating in can be an activity that you can do in the classroom. You can develop 4 corners. So here I have my 12 o'clock that represents action, my 3 o'clock that represents celebration, my 6 o'clock that's furry friends, and 9 o'clock that's a sporting event. And what you do is you get people to pair up, and it doesn't matter who, but you get 2 people that pair up to discuss the pictures describing an action. And then they have to rotate and go to their 3 o'clock appointment, find a new person and talk about a celebration picture that they're sharing. And then they mingle once again and switch and find another partner, and then so on and so forth. And what you do is these become your appointment buddies. Once you have your appointment buddy, then you can do additional activities and say, okay, now find your 12 o'clock appointment and you're going to do such and such activity. And now you've integrated the use of technology. It's a low-level technology skill. Of course, never make the assumption that your students know technology, but it is certainly something that you can use in the classroom. I'm going to share the instructions of what I just shared earlier, where students identify a picture for each category. And then you have your partners pair up and discuss picture A. That becomes your appointment A buddy or your 12 o'clock buddy. And then you switch pairs, and now you have your other buddy. And then you repeat the process, and you use these appointment buddies to do a lesson activity, anything that involves pairing. Since you use the pictures in this activity, can you think of other ways that we would use pictures in the classroom for lesson ideas specific to maybe employability skills? So here are some ideas. Students are notorious for being able to identify problems or errors that go wrong in someone else's work, right? In their classmate, they could point out a spelling error or something. But what if you had them use their phone on a little scavenger hunt where they had to go out and look for things in their community, maybe a billboard that was misspelled or the wrong syntax or a marketing idea, or maybe something they watch on TV that they could take a picture of. It's a low technology skill, but they're using a higher level order thinking process to identify the problem and then offering a correction. So that's one way. Another thing is comparison shopping. We want to ensure that our students are good consumers and they have the skill sets to be a buyer beware. So that's another idea. Maybe using the pictures for safety hazards on the job, understanding body language. They take pictures of, what it means when someone's staring at someone or not giving them direct eye contact, or they're crossing their arms, or they could simply use it for documentation to take a picture of something so that they could save for later. And then, of course, note taking. So those are some ways that they could use their pictures on their phone, and it requires a low skill level. So we're going to transition into the use of gestures. Okay. And we have some pictures here on the screen. Use your context clues. Can you think of other gestures in relation to technology that we use on our phones or maybe on a mobile device? On the screen, it says double tap, swipe, pinch, or expand. What are some other gestures that we use when we navigate our phone? I added gestures on this presentation because these are some of the fundamental skills that we had to learn when we first got our smartphones. Someone had to teach us, oh, look, you have to tap, you have to swipe, you have to pinch it. It's not something that was ingrained in us, unless you were a millennial that you grew up with technology, but those are some of the things that we had to learn. Here are some other gestures that are some of the fundamental ones that I hope that you would consider integrating into your lesson planning for your students, because we want to make sure that they know how to do this. When I go into the lab all the time, I find that students don't know many of these. Some students just use their phone for calls. And so we want to make that digital divide diminish. And how do we do that? We teach them. We don't take anything for granted. We ensure that if we don't teach them, then that means they didn't learn it. So we have to step up and ensure that we're teaching them these skill sets. Built-in phone apps. These are called widgets. That's right, widgets. A widget is a built-in phone app. This is an app that carries a specific function that is embedded in your phone. So I have a screenshot here of some widget examples. You can look at your phone right now. Can you think of any widgets, or can you see on your phone what type of widgets you have on your phone right now? So all of these are examples of apps. Most of these are examples of widgets that came with your phone. In other words, you purchased it and it was already there. These widgets, which I'm going to focus on now, are really important. I mean, think about our daily lives and how many of these we use on a regular basis. I mean, I'm using my clock right now to tell me how many more minutes I have before this lady stops talking, right? I always use my calendar and my weather. I have my weather app set for 7 different cities. These are skill sets that we can incorporate with our students specific to employability skills. These are some of the ones that we're going to be going over in the next few minutes. Before we can even go with widgets, we have to ensure that our students know how to manage a widget, because they need to know if they can delete it, how many notifications they want from that widget, what type of access. And again, they might not have the ability to go to an Apple store or ask their children or ask their sister, and they're coming to class because they're relying on you. They're asking you, yes, I'm coming to class to learn GED, but I could learn how to use digital literacy skill sets in my GED class. I can learn how to use my smartphone in my English class, right? Or my citizenship class. So let's not take any of that for granted. The first thing that we need to learn, though, is our settings and learn what the compatibility level of our phone is, depending on our version. Is it a version 7, a version 10? And if there's a widget out there that they want to download that is not already part of their phone, sometimes it will not work if they have an old phone, or maybe their phone doesn't have the data to support it or the memory to support it. And then, of course, managing those notifications. So let's talk about the first one here. We're going to talk about the measurement widget. And if you're using the iPhone or an Apple device, you're going to recognize the icon on the left side. And if you have an Android, you might recognize the icon on the right. And so this measurement widget would be a really great tool to use in the classroom. And before you even use it in the classroom, I would navigate with the students on how to download it, how to access it. That would be like a pre-lesson, not even a lesson, it's more technical assistance, because I want to ensure that all my students are going to be successful with the lesson that they're going to learn. So I'm going to set them up for success. And probably a day before, I would ensure that they knew how to download it. And then on a subsequent lesson, I would show them how to use it. And so these are the instructions on how to use the measurement widget, depending on your device, if it's an Android or if it's an iOS. Here is just a sample activity where students can use their appointment buddy to identify an object that they have to measure. And now the pairs have to go out and measure a chair or a wall or a book or whatever it is that you have for them. And then they have to document what the steps were to obtain that measurement and in what system. Was it a metric system or not? And then you can implement that activity into a contextualized model. So you'd be surprised as to some of the methods that our students used. When I was in the classroom, it's been some time now, but at the time there were smartphones around. And some of my students, like when they were shopping for furniture, when they were buying tile because they were going to fix the flooring in their home, they would use string to measure a room, or they would use string to measure their children's feet if they were going to buy them shoes. Or if they wanted to buy a new sofa, they would measure a side of a wall with their feet. Like they would put one foot in front of the other, or they would use cutouts. Like they would have a desk and then they would have like a big piece of cardboard, and then they would cut out the cardboard to match the furniture, and then they would take that to the store. Those are some ways that I know my students used to measure. If we can transition our students to use these widgets, imagine how it can help them in their jobs. Maybe they're trying to get into a job in construction, or they work for a moving company or a manufacturing company. They're working in logistics. They're auto mechanics. They're working in landscaping, in interior design, or carpentry. Those are just some of the occupations that they would be able to use this measurement widget, as well as day-to-day life. But this is that example that I told you about, using that mingle activity of the pictures we took earlier and how you could use your partner to do the pair work. So let's move on to notes. This is another widget. Have you ever encountered a time where there's information that you need to provide to the same student multiple times? Maybe it's a formula, a grammar rule, an important date, a password, or instructions on how to do something. Using the notes feature on your phone is a way for students to do note taking when they don't have paper pencil, because that's typically what they fall back to, right? They take paper pencil, or maybe they might take a picture. But if it's something that requires documenting something lengthy that you cannot take a picture of, Well, then that's when Notes comes in. And it has lots of great additional features, such as an embedded QR reader where you could scan. You can add voice notes. You can upload your resume. Imagine that you have your resume. You don't have to have Google Drive. You can add it to your notes. Maybe you need to keep your insurance cards handy or an important picture. Those are just some examples of how you would be able to use those. So you can house that important information that you use. They can organize their notes or their information. I have several notes and I've had notes for, gosh, I think my oldest note is 8 years old. And sometimes when I didn't have anything to write on, I used my notes feature and I still have those notes today. So they're really convenient and it's something that's available for your students to use. You can share your notes with someone else. I mentioned earlier that my daughter has an Android phone and I have an Apple phone. And so the way we communicate is through WhatsApp. We use notes a lot, especially for grocery shopping, or she's trying to look for a job and I'll send her links. So I'll post the link in the note, and then from the note, I post it in WhatsApp. And it just helps me organize what I've already sent to her. Having access to information is power, as you all know. So whether you're using Outlook or Email Blue, the email widget is a must. Incorporating the use of this employability resource as part of regular instruction allows students to not only be in the know, but they become efficient in managing their time and productivity. These widgets are more than just reading emails. Students can also benefit from learning how to manage their emails, such as filing, responding to emails, and prioritizing their emails. Then there's the calendar aspect. They have the calendar on their phone as a separate widget, but then there's the calendar feature within their email. So they could learn about that using attachments, creating and filtering emails. The best part of all is that if a student has more than one email account, they can learn how to merge their accounts into one widget. I mean, I think that's something that we can even use as adult educators too, right? It would simplify our life. So again, these are just some of the skill sets that they can learn in order to help them integrate into the labor market. So we have our calendar for storing important events and syncing all our calendars into one. The icon I have right now is for an Android, it's for a Google Calendar, but certainly there are Apple calendars. You have a QR code reader. You have that built into your camera and into the notes features. But do your students know that? They might not know that. Oftentimes people will go and download a QR code reader and it's going to be $2.99, or you don't know if there's any bugs, or you don't know what's going on, if they're going to steal your information. They might be shady companies when you already have it built in your phone. We also have reminders. These assist with time management and prioritizing what's important. We have our voice memos, especially for those auditory learners. I used to use voice memos with my son all the time because at the time he couldn't read. So I would use voice memos. And now I just keep them because they're just cute. We have our contacts, right? What we can do with our contacts, especially when we meet new people, like our new boss, right? But we could share those contacts within our text messages, in our emails. And those are things that students may not know how to do. And we're trying to help them be more efficient and increase their productivity level. People mentioned using maps. How better way than to be able to estimate your time of arrival than using maps? You can also discern which route is faster or safer. Then, of course, many mentioned the weather app, which also allows for planning. And there's Wallet. So we could teach about that so that we can store boarding passes, tickets, debit cards, identity cards, keys, reward coupons, and much, much more, right? I wouldn't necessarily encourage starting off with debit cards. I would begin with maybe coupons or reward. Do a needs assessment when you're in class and you're going to incorporate digital skill sets. Find out what your students have, what they know, and what they can do. Don't assume that they all have a smartphone. Don't assume that if they have a smartphone, They're able to download a new app because they might not have the data management for it. They might not have the memory for it. They might not have the data plan for it. They might not have the internet access for it, or they might not have the rights to it because maybe it's not their phone. The second point is no smartphone, no problem. You didn't learn how to drive for the most part. You didn't learn how to drive on your own car, right? Rare, it's happened. But you typically learn how to drive on someone else's car. Why can't you learn how to use a smartphone without having a smartphone? There's just so many ways that we could teach digital literacy skill sets that we don't need for them to have the device. If we can provide it, great. But if they don't have it, why are we going to stunt them on access to that information? So we're going to leave assumptions at the door. You might be surprised to learn what students have access to and to what degree. So no one and done lessons. You got to go deep. Stay away from surface level learning where the skill is taught on one day only. It takes several lessons to understand how to use something. And then it takes a bit longer to feel confident enough to apply a skill without assistance. Build on past lessons to fortify learning transfer. Before moving on to a new skill set, see how you can bridge the new with the use of a previous lesson. That helps with making connections and building on rigor. Also consider, don't take anything for granted. Instead, prepare for rehearsal and not practice. Well, Liz, what's the difference between rehearsal and practice? Aren't they the same thing? Oh, I'm glad you asked. Practice is when you do something over and over and over again. Rehearsal is when you do something once, you make an adjustment. Then you try it again. You make an adjustment. And if it's not going well, you stop and you start all over another day. If you continue doing something and it's coming out or you're doing it incorrectly, your brain is now learning how to do it incorrectly. So you got to stop before you continue fortifying that. So that's what rehearsal is. Don't assume quick understanding. Don't assume that just because you showed them once, they're going to know how to do it or how to apply it. What I'm doing here today is the worst way to learn. I'm just telling you about it. I'm not even showing you. We're not practicing it. We're not applying it in any contextualized manner. But the assumption is that we are all professionals and we can understand it once and we'll be okay. But I do know that you have the basis and the foundation and the creativeness to be able to use an idea, adopt it, and modify it and make it your own. So what you can do instead is offer support in 3 different ways with your learners. You're going to show them, you're going to explain to them, you're going to give them some type of visual instruction where they could take home that copy of instructions or model, and then you're going to do it with them in the class. You can't go straight to, well, let me show you, now you do it, because now it's done, and they're going to need that to fortify the learning. They're going to need at least 3 different ways. Don't do a flyby lesson or tutorial. I'm going to teach you this skill set. Oh, but before that, let me show you how to do this before I go into the next thing. Teach one lesson at a time. Introduce and follow through with one app, one concept, or one strategy at a time. You don't need to move on. Why are you racing? You want to make sure they understand it and they understand it well. And finally, you need technology skills to survive, but you need intermediate skills to thrive. And that leads us to our ending. Did we meet our objectives for today? Did we incorporate the use of digital literacy for adult education learners? Raise awareness of features and apps to adapt for a classroom application? And use everyday lesson applications to enhance learning transfer.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining. And we hope to see you next time on Workforce Wednesday.
Bye, everybody.
We hope you enjoyed this pre-recorded webinar. After you have passed the final test with a score of 80% or greater and have received your certificate of completion, Please take a few moments to complete the course evaluation. Participant feedback helps Train PD at TCAL continue to provide high-quality professional development. To leave a course feedback, please go to the completed portion of your transcript. To do this, hover over the My Learning tab and select View Your Transcript. Click on the drop-down arrow next to the word Active and select Completed. Then, click Evaluate in the drop-down menu next to the course you just completed. Please note that your feedback is greatly appreciated.